Hope you all are doing well today. Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. Find a quiet space, put on your headphones, and give me the next few minutes of your full attention. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just a story, it's a mirror. And some of you might see yourself in it. She stood in her own kitchen, watching the man she'd loved for 2 decades pack his bags. But here's what broke her. He wasn't leaving alone. He was leaving with her sister, the sister she'd raised, the sister she'd sacrificed everything for. And as he walked out, he turned and said 5 words that would haunt her. "You were always too weak, Sarah." That night, she made a decision that would change everything. But we'll get to that. First, let me tell you how a woman who lost everything became the person her betrayers wished they'd never underestimated. Now, I want you to think about something. Have you ever given someone everything, your time, your trust, your love, only to watch them walk away like you were nothing? If you have, keep listening, because Sarah's story might just be the permission you need to start writing your own ending. Drop a comment right now if you've ever felt invisible in your own life. Just one word, invisible. Let's see how many of us have felt this way. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 28 years ago, I thought I knew what love looked like. It looked like cooking meals that went cold, waiting for someone to come home. It looked like working 2 jobs so my younger sister Emily could go to college. It looked like silence, the kind that eats you from the inside until you forget what your own voice sounds like. I married David when I was 23. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who made promises that sounded like poetry. For 17 years, I believed every word. I worked at a small clothing store during the day and did freelance graphic design at night, projects that took hours, paid little, but kept us afloat when his business ventures failed. Emily moved in with us when she was 18. After our parents passed in a car accident, I became her mother, her sister, her everything. I paid for her education, her apartment when she started college, her dreams, and she called me her hero. Isn't it strange how the people you die for are sometimes the ones who bury you? It was a Tuesday morning in October. I remember because Tuesdays were the day I worked from home, the one morning I didn't have to rush. The autumn sun painted golden stripes across our bedroom floor. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something close to peace. Then I heard it. Laughter. Low and intimate. Coming from downstairs. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors, and stopped at the doorway to the living room. David sat on the couch, his arm around Emily. Her head rested on his shoulder. And the way they looked at each other, I'd spent 17 years begging him to look at me like that. What's going on? My voice came out smaller than I intended. They jumped apart, but not quickly enough. Guilt has a smell, you know. It smells like cheap excuses and expensive lies. David stood, straightening his shirt like that would straighten the truth. "Sarah, we need to talk." I didn't move. Couldn't move. My body knew before my mind did. Emily looked at the floor, tears already forming. "Sarah, I'm sorry." "Don't," I whispered. "Don't say you're sorry. Not yet." What followed was 40 minutes of words that rewrote my entire history. They'd been seeing each other for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. While I was working on design projects in the next room, they were building a future that had no space for me. "I never meant to hurt you," Emily sobbed. "It just happened." "Nothing just happens," I said, my voice finally finding its edge. "You made a choice. Every single day for 2.5 years, you chose this." David had the audacity to look annoyed. "Sarah, you have to understand. You and I, we've been over for years. You just didn't want to see it." "So you thought sleeping with my sister was the kind way to tell me?" He shrugged. Actually shrugged. "We're in love, real love, not the obligation kind, obligation. 17 years of sacrifice and I was an obligation. I want you both out," I said quietly. "What?" "I want you out of my house." "Both of you," David laughed. Actually laughed. "Your house? Sarah, my name is on that deed too. You own half of nothing." You've never really owned anything. Without me, you're nothing. You were always too weak to survive alone. Too dependent. Too scared. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. Then I looked at Emily, the girl I'd tucked into bed 1,000 times, and saw a woman I'd never known. We'll see about that, I said quietly. You have until Friday to get your things out. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't do that. Watch me. After they left that afternoon, I sat on the kitchen floor until the sun set and the room filled with shadows. I didn't cry. Crying felt like giving them something else they didn't deserve. Instead, I opened my laptop and started making lists. Lists of assets, lists of accounts, lists of every single thing that had my name on it. I'd spent 17 years being the background character in my own life. That ended today. At 2 a.m, I emailed every lawyer within a 50-mile radius. By 8 a.m., I had 3 consultations scheduled. The first lawyer I met was a man in his 60s who looked at me with something close to pity. Mrs. Mitchell, in cases like these, the best thing is to try to work it out amicably. These things happen, and I stood up. Thank you for your time. The second lawyer was a woman named Rebecca Torres, maybe 45, with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie the world could tell. She listened to my entire story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. How much do you want to make him pay? Excuse me? Your husband. How badly do you want this to hurt him? I thought about that question. About 17 years of being told I was lucky he stayed. About Emily wearing my old clothes to her college graduation because I couldn't afford to buy her new ones while David bought himself a new car. I don't want revenge, I said finally. I want justice. And I want to make sure that when this is over, I never have to depend on anyone again. Rebecca smiled. Then let's get to work. The divorce took 9 months. David fought for everything. The house, the savings, even the furniture I'd bought with my own money. His lawyer was expensive, aggressive, the kind who treated every hearing like a war. But Rebecca was better. She found things I didn't even know existed. Hidden accounts. Investments David had made with our money that only had his name on them. Payments to Emily's apartment that he'd tried to write off as business expenses. Every lie, every secret, she dragged it into the light. In the end, I got the house, half of his retirement, and a restraining order against both of them coming within 500 feet of my property. The day the divorce was finalized, Rebecca took me to lunch. What are you going to do now? She asked. Survive, I said. That's not a plan, Sarah. That's a default setting. Then I guess I need a new plan. She slid a business card across the table. This is my friend Jennifer. She runs a women's co-working space downtown. They help women start businesses, build skills, find their footing. You've got graphic design experience. Use it. I stared at that card for a long moment. I don't know if I'm good enough. The woman who just survived a war with a narcissist and came out with a house and her dignity intact? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You're good enough. That afternoon, I drove to the address on the card. The building was an old renovated factory, all exposed brick and huge windows that let in rivers of light. Inside, women sat at laptops, held meetings, laughed over coffee. It looked like life, the kind I'd forgotten existed. Jennifer met me at the door. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with red hair pulled back in a messy bun and paint stains on her jeans. You must be Sarah, she said. Rebecca told me about you. She did? Said you were about to become dangerous. She grinned. Come on, let me show you around. The space had everything. High-speed internet, design software, meeting rooms, even a small kitchen. And the women, there were maybe 20 of them, all different ages, all working on different things. One was coding, another was on a call with a client. A third was sketching something that looked like a wedding dress. What is this place? I asked. It's where women come when they're done asking for permission, Jennifer said simply. You need a place to work? I don't know if I can afford. First month is free. After that, you pay what you can. We're not here to make money off struggle, Sarah. We're here to end it. I started coming every day. At first, I just sat at a desk, trying to remember how to be a person who existed outside of someone else's needs. But slowly I started working again. Small projects at first. Logos for local businesses, flyers for community events. Things that paid $50, $100. But then something shifted. One of the women at the co-working space, a wedding planner named Amanda, asked if I could design invitations for a client. I said yes. The client loved them so much she posted them on Instagram. By the next morning, I had 12 messages asking for custom designs. Within 3 months, I had more work than I could handle. Within 6 months, I'd made more money than I'd made in the entire previous year. Jennifer found me one evening, staring at my laptop screen in disbelief. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said. I just made more this month than David ever brought home. She sat down beside me. You know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who spent years being told she was small. And now she's realizing she was never small. She was just surrounded by people who needed her to be. That night, I went home to my house, and stood in the kitchen where it had all fallen apart. The space looked different now. I'd repainted the walls, bought new furniture, filled the windowsills with plants. It didn't look like a place where something had died. It looked like a place where something was growing. I opened my laptop and started a new project, a website for my design business. I called it Mitchell Creative Studio. No clever name, no attempt to be something I wasn't. Just my name, my work, my terms. The site went live on a Saturday. By Monday, I had 20 new inquiries. One of them was from a woman named Catherine. Her message was different from the others. I saw your work online, but I'm not writing because I need a designer. I'm writing because I read your story, the one you posted about starting over. My husband just left me for my best friend. I don't know how to survive this. How did you do it? I stared at that message for an hour. Then I wrote back. You survive it by refusing to let their betrayal define your worth. You survive it by building something they can't touch. And you survive it by realizing that the person you are with them isn't the person you're meant to be. If you want to talk, I'm here. She called me that night. We talked for 2 hours. She cried, I listened, and when we hung up, she said, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone." That conversation changed something in me. I started adding a blog to my website, not about design, but about survival, about rebuilding, about becoming the woman who walks away. The response was overwhelming. Women wrote to me from all over the country. Some had been betrayed like I had. Others were trapped in marriages that had died years ago. Some were just tired of being invisible. I answered every single message. One woman, Lisa, wrote, "My husband says I'm too old to start over. I'm 53 and he's leaving me for someone half my age. I don't know if I have the strength," I wrote back. "Lisa, you know what's harder than starting over at 53? Staying in a place that makes you feel dead at 54, 55, 60? You have decades ahead of you. Don't waste them on someone who couldn't see your value." 6 months later, she sent me a photo of her new art studio. The caption, "Turns out I'm not too old. I was just with someone too blind." A year after the divorce, I was sitting in a coffee shop working on a client project when I heard a voice behind me. "Sarah?" I turned. Emily stood there, thinner than I remembered, circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Can I sit?" she asked quietly. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. To walk away, to protect the peace I'd fought so hard to build. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe the last thread of who I used to be, made me nod. She sat down, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I know you probably don't want to hear this, she began, but I needed to tell you. David left me. I waited. Felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just tired. 3 months after we moved in together, she continued, her voice shaking. He said I wasn't what he thought I was. That I was boring, needy, that I reminded him too much of you. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. You were right about everything. About him, about me, about all of it. And I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know. I took a sip of my coffee, let her words settle. Emily, can I ask you something? She nodded. When you were sleeping with him, in my house, while I was working to pay for your life, did you think about me at all? She flinched. Every day. And you did it anyway. Yes. I leaned back, studied her. This woman who'd once been the little girl I'd read bedtime stories to, who'd cried in my arms after our parents died, who'd promised she'd always love me. Emily, I forgive you. Her eyes widened with something like hope. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means I'm no longer carrying what you did. I'm free of it. And you should be too. But I miss you. You miss the version of me who carried you. That woman doesn't exist anymore. She died the day you betrayed her. And the woman I am now? I gathered my things, stood up. She doesn't have room for people who saw her love as weakness. Sarah, please. I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily. I really do. But you won't find it with me. I left her sitting there and I didn't look back. As I walked to my car, I felt something release in my chest. The last chain I'd been carrying without even knowing it. That evening, Jennifer called. Sarah, you sitting down? Should I be? I just got off the phone with a publisher. They want to talk to you about turning your blog into a book. I almost dropped my phone. What? Your story. The posts about survival, about rebuilding. They think it could help a lot of women. Are you interested? Was I interested? I'd spent a year pouring my heart into those posts, never imagining anyone beyond my small audience would read them. Yes, I said. Yes, I'm interested. The book took 6 months to write. It wasn't easy, reliving the pain, the betrayal, the long nights of wondering if I'd survive. But it was also cathartic, like finally closing a door I'd been holding open too long. Called it The Woman Who Walked Away, a guide to rebuilding after betrayal. It published on a Tuesday, exactly 2 years after the morning I'd found David and Emily together. The first week, it sold 3,000 copies. By the end of the month, it hit a bestseller list. Women started recognizing me in coffee shops, at the grocery store, at the co-working space. They'd approach me with tears in their eyes, saying, "Your book saved my life," or "You gave me the courage to leave," or "I finally feel like I'm not crazy." One woman grabbed my hand in a bookstore and said, "My daughter is in an abusive marriage. I gave her your book. She left him last week. You gave her the words she needed to find her voice." I cried in the bathroom after that conversation, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that my pain had become someone else's permission to heal. 3 years after the divorce, Mitchell Creative Studio had grown into a team of 5. We didn't just do design work. We specifically worked with women-owned businesses, nonprofits supporting survivors, organizations fighting for women's rights. Every project felt like a small act of rebellion against the man who'd once told me I was nothing. The co-working space expanded too. Jennifer and I became partners, opening a second location across town. We added workshops on financial literacy, legal rights, mental health, business planning. It became more than a workspace. It became a community. One afternoon, I was leading a workshop on building confidence after loss when a young woman in the back raised her hand. She couldn't have been more than 25, with red-rimmed eyes and a wedding ring she kept twisting nervously. "How do you know when it's time to leave?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The room went silent. Every woman there knew that question. We'd all asked it at some point. I took a breath. You know it's time to leave when staying costs more than going. When you've become so small trying to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be, that you can't remember who you actually are. When you're more afraid of your own life than you are of starting over. She nodded, tears spilling over. I'm so scared. I know, I said softly. But let me tell you something. The woman who's scared but leaves anyway is braver than the woman who stays because she's too scared to go. Fear isn't the enemy. It's the compass that shows you where you need to grow. After the workshop, she approached me. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret it? Leaving, starting over? I thought about that question. About the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in an empty house. About the times I'd questioned every decision. About the moments I'd felt so alone I could barely breathe. No, I said finally. Not even once. Because even on my worst day alone, I'm happier than I ever was trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. She left with my card, Jennifer's number, and Rebecca's contact information. 2 weeks later, she sent me a message. I left. I'm terrified, but I'm free. That's when I knew. My story wasn't just my story anymore. It had become a map for other women to find their way home to themselves. 4 years after the divorce, on a random Wednesday afternoon, I received an email that stopped me cold. The sender, David Mitchell. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. The email was short. Sarah, I know I have no right to contact you, but I saw your book in a store window today. I bought it, I read it. You were right about everything. I was a coward who blamed you for my own failures. I made you small because I was terrified of how big you could become without me. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I needed you to know that you were never the problem. I was. I hope you found the happiness I was too broken to give you. I read it 3 times, waited for anger, for vindication, for satisfaction. But all I felt was indifference. The kind that comes when someone's opinion of you no longer has the power to wound or heal. I wrote back 1 sentence. I hope you find peace. David, I already have. Then I closed my laptop and went back to work. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my house, watching the sun set over the city. The sky burned orange and purple, and the air smelled like the jasmine I'd planted in the garden. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago. The one who'd sat on a kitchen floor convinced her life was over. The one who'd believed that love meant making yourself invisible so someone else could shine. She felt like a stranger now. 5 years. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime, sometimes like yesterday. But what mattered wasn't the time. It was the distance I'd traveled inside myself. A few weeks after receiving David's email, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a women's conference in Chicago. 3,000 attendees, all women in business, women rebuilding, women refusing to stay broken. When the organizer called, I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me. But then I remembered something Rebecca had told me years ago. The things that scare you are usually the things you need to do. So I said yes. The morning of the conference, I stood backstage, hands shaking, wondering what I could possibly say to 3,000 women that would matter. Then I heard the MC introduce me. Please welcome Sarah Mitchell, author, entrepreneur, and the woman who turned her greatest betrayal into her biggest victory. The applause was deafening. I walked onto that stage, looked out at the sea of faces, some young, some old, all watching with hope in their eyes, and I started to speak. 6 years ago, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. I caught my husband and my sister together in my living room. 6 years ago, I lost my marriage, my family, and every illusion I'd built about who I was. And I stood in my kitchen that night thinking, this is how my story ends. I paused, let the silence breathe. But here's what I learned. Endings are just beginnings wearing disguises. That night wasn't the end of my story. It was the prologue to the life I was always meant to live. For the next 45 minutes, I shared everything. The pain, the fear, the nights I couldn't sleep, the days I couldn't eat, the moments I wanted to give up. But I also shared the victories, the first client, the first dollar I made on my own, the first time I realized I hadn't thought about David in an entire day. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Women rushed the stage afterward, some crying, some laughing, all saying the same thing in different ways. Thank you for showing us it's possible. One woman, maybe in her 60s, grabbed both my hands and said, I've been married for 40 years to a man who treats me like furniture. I kept telling myself I was too old to leave. But if you can rebuild at 40, maybe I can rebuild at 63. You can, I told her, and you will. That night, lying in my hotel room, I received a text from Jennifer. You're trending on Twitter. Women are sharing your speech everywhere. The woman who walked away is the #3 hashtag in the country. I opened Twitter and watched in disbelief as thousands of women shared their own stories of walking away, starting over, refusing to stay small. It wasn't just my story anymore. It had become a movement. The next morning, my publisher called. Sarah, we need to talk about a second book. I don't know if I have another book in me, I said honestly. You do. This one isn't about your story. It's about theirs, she paused. All these women sharing their journeys. They need a guide. Something practical. How to leave. How to start over. How to build a life when you think you have nothing. You've done it. Now teach them. I spent the next year writing The Roadmap Home, a practical guide to leaving and rebuilding. It wasn't poetic or inspirational. It was tactical. How to open a bank account your partner doesn't know about. How to document abuse. How to find a lawyer. How to save money in secret. How to tell your children. How to survive the first night alone. How to keep going when you want to go back. Every chapter was born from a question a woman had asked me. Every tip came from a lesson I'd learned the hard way. I interviewed divorce lawyers, therapists, financial advisors, women who'd left with nothing and built everything. When it published, it didn't just hit bestseller lists, it became required reading in domestic violence shelters across the country. Therapists recommended it to clients. Lawyers gave it to their divorce cases. Women passed it to friends who needed permission to leave. But the letter that changed everything came from a woman named Grace. She wrote, Dear Sarah, I'm writing this from my new apartment, the first place I've ever lived alone. I left my husband 6 months ago after 20 years of emotional abuse. Your first book gave me hope. Your second book gave me a plan. But I'm writing because I want to tell you something I think you need to hear. You didn't just save my life. You saved my daughter's. She's 15, and she was starting to believe that men treating women like property was normal. That love meant sacrifice and silence. But watching me leave, watching me rebuild, watching me become strong, it rewired everything she thought she knew about what women deserve. You didn't just change my life, Sarah. You changed the life of the next generation. Thank you. I read that letter 10 times, then called Jennifer crying so hard I could barely speak. What's wrong? She asked, panicked. Nothing's wrong, I managed. Everything's right. For the first time, everything's right. Around that same time, something strange started happening. Women would approach me in public, at coffee shops, bookstores, airports, and hand me things. A young woman gave me a bracelet she'd made with the words, I walked away, engraved on it. An older woman handed me a painting she'd created of a woman standing in a doorway, light pouring in. A teenager gave me a poem about her mother leaving her abusive father. Your story made my mom brave enough to leave, she told me. We're safe now because of you. I kept every single gift in my office. They lined the shelves, covered the walls, filled drawers. each one a reminder that pain shared becomes lighter, and courage shared becomes contagious. By year 7, Mitchell Creative Studio had grown into something I'd never imagined. We'd expanded into a full-service agency with 20 employees, all women, many of them survivors themselves. We didn't just design brands. We built movements. Every client we took on was a woman-owned business, a nonprofit supporting survivors, or an organization fighting for change. One afternoon, our creative director, a woman named Michaela, who'd left her own abusive marriage 3 years earlier, came into my office with tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" I asked, alarmed. She held up her phone. "I just got a message from my ex-husband. He saw the work I did for the Women's Shelter campaign. He said," she took a shaky breath, "he said he always knew I'd amount to nothing without him, that I was wasting my time playing at a career." I took the phone from her hands and deleted the message. "Michaela, look at me." She did. "That man spent years trying to make you small because he was terrified of how big you'd become without him. And he was right to be terrified. Look at what you've built. Look at the lives you've changed with your work. His opinion of you is irrelevant. It's noise from a past that no longer has power over you." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know, sometimes the old voices come back." "They do," I agreed. "But the difference now is that you have new voices, louder voices that tell you the truth. You're surrounded by women who see your worth, including yourself." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything. For building this place, for showing us it's possible." "You showed yourself," I told her. "I just held the mirror." That conversation stayed with me for days. It reminded me that healing isn't linear, that even years later the scars can ache. But it also reminded me that we don't heal alone. We heal in community, surrounded by people who reflect back our strength when we forget we have it. As year 8 approached, I made a decision. I wanted to do something bigger than books, bigger than speeches, bigger than design work. I wanted to create something permanent, something that would outlive me. I met with Jennifer, Rebecca, and a few other women who'd become integral to my journey. "I want to start a foundation," I told them. "One that helps women leave. That pays for lawyers, temporary housing, childcare, job training. That gives them the resources they need to walk away and stay away." Jennifer leaned forward. "How much are we talking?" "Everything," I said. "I want to put every penny I've made from the books, every speaking fee, everything into this." Rebecca looked at me carefully. "Sarah, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars." "Are you sure?" I thought about the woman I'd been 8 years ago, sitting on a kitchen floor with nothing. No money, no plan, no idea if I'd survive. I'd been lucky. I had skills, education, people who helped me. But so many women didn't. They stayed in dangerous situations because leaving felt impossible. "I'm sure," I said. "Money can always be made again. Lives can't." 6 months later, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation officially launched. We started small, helping 10 women that first year. By year 2, we'd helped 50. By year 3, over 200 women had gone through our program. Each woman received legal support, financial assistance, job placement help, and ongoing counseling. We didn't just help them leave. We helped them build lives worth staying for. I'd built a business, written 2 books, started a foundation, and helped thousands of women find their strength. I'd learned to sleep alone without feeling lonely. I'd discovered that my worth wasn't measured by who chose to stay, but by who I chose to become after they left. One evening, almost 9 years after that terrible Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a hospital in Oregon. Emily had been in a car accident. She was stable, but had listed me as her emergency contact. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Part of me wanted to hang up, to let that chapter stay closed. But another part, the part that had learned that forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for others, knew I had to go. I flew to Portland the next morning. The hospital was cold and smelled like antiseptic and fear. Emily lay in bed, her leg in a cast, bruises covering her arms. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," she whispered. "I came," I said simply. We sat in silence for a while. Then she spoke. "Sarah, I've been sober for 2 years." I looked at her more carefully, saw the clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "After David left me, I fell apart," she continued. "Started drinking. Lost jobs, lost apartments. I hit bottom so hard I didn't think I'd survive. But I went to rehab. Got therapy. Started facing what I'd done." She took a shaky breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I haven't forgiven myself. But I need you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. And I'm sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserved better from me." I pulled a chair close to the bed. "Emily, I forgave you years ago. Not because you earned it, but because carrying anger was killing the person I was trying to become." "Then why did you come? After everything?" I thought about that question. About the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. About how pain can make you bitter or make you bigger. "Because forgiveness doesn't mean pretending you're dead to me," I said finally. "It means accepting that you're human, flawed, capable of terrible things, but also capable of change. And because somewhere under all the hurt, there's still a little girl I used to read bedtime stories to." "I came for her," Emily sobbed then. Deep, raw sounds that held years of guilt and grief. I held her hand and let her cry. When she finally calmed, she looked at me with something like wonder. "How did you become this person?" she asked. "How did you turn what we did to you into something so beautiful?" I smiled softly. "I didn't turn it into anything. I just refused to let it be the end of my story. The betrayal was one chapter, Emily. It doesn't get to be the whole book." I stayed in Portland for 3 days, until Emily was discharged. We talked, really talked, for the first time in nearly a decade. I told her about the business, the books, the foundation. She told me about her journey through addiction and recovery, about the amends she'd been making, about the woman she was trying to become. On my last day there, as I was leaving, she grabbed my hand. "Sarah, do you think we could talk sometimes? Not go back to how things were, but maybe build something new?" I squeezed her hand. "Emily, I think we can be friendly. I think we can be kind to each other. But sisters?" I shook my head gently. "That trust takes more than good intentions. It takes time. Years, maybe. And I'm not sure we'll ever get there. But friendly is a start." She nodded, tears falling but acceptance in her eyes. "Friendly is more than I deserve. Thank you." Flying home, I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't about reconciliation. It's not about going back. It's about releasing the weight so you can move forward. I'd forgiven Emily, but I hadn't forgotten. And that was okay. Some boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges you choose not to cross. And here's the truth no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. When everything was stripped away, my marriage, my sister, my illusions, I discovered something underneath. A woman who'd been there all along, waiting for permission to exist. I didn't need to become someone new. I needed to stop being someone small. So to anyone listening who feels invisible right now, who feels like they're nothing without someone, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You are not the betrayal. You are not the pain. You are not the person who left you. You are the sunrise that keeps coming even after the darkest night. You are the foundation that remains standing after the storm. You are the woman who will look back one day and realize the moment they walked away was the moment you finally walked toward yourself. David was right about one thing. I was weak. But weak things don't break, they bend. And when they straighten again, they're stronger than anything that tried to destroy them. If this story touched something in you, don't just scroll past it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there is a woman sitting on her kitchen floor right now, convinced her life is over. Let's prove her wrong. Drop a comment telling me, what's the one thing you'll never allow again? One sentence? Let's build a wall of boundaries together. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just changing authors. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong.